You are listening to the Enormocast.
Hey, crack climbers. Do you want a crack shoe that can easily do it all? From toddler-sized thin tips to soul-crushing off-widths and every single size in between? Well, too bad. Because frankly, that shoe doesn't exist. So this is where the word quiver comes in. Serious rock climbers simply don't rely on a single pair of shoes for everything, amigos. And Sportiva is more than happy to supply the goods. Start with the TC Pro, and you've got the monster-wide, all-witted thin hands covered. Then a pair of Eco Mythos will pick up the slack in those smaller, hard-to-stuff sizes. Incidentally, both face climb like butter too. Well, not all slippery and greasy like actual butter, but, you know, delicious and satisfying. Then for the really, really thin stuff, well, you're kind of on your own because those campfire Indian Creek debates can rage late into the night. Loose sport climbing or bouldering shoe? That's not a bad bet. Or just stuff those TC Pros and get strong? That works for some. Paddle outside the crack? Seen a lot of really good climbers go that route. Personally, I run a sized up Mira or a Katana and grimace and go. But whatever size is your crack dream or nightmare, Sportiva has the right weapons to drop into your quiver. And they're built to outlast even the most pitiful flailing. Check it all out at Sportiva.com or the local shop that really could use your business right now.
We gotta get
Listen, where are you playing in town? Are you playing here?
We're doing the Normo Dome, whatever it is. It's terrific.
Oh,
It's
yeah,
big
big
house. We
place,
sold
that
it
side
out.
of town. That's a
Very
big
nice.
place. You sold
What's
it
that,
out.
20,000 seats?
We really should.
The hell are you doing?
I couldn't sleep. I'm checking the ropes. There was a frayed end on your rope, and I'm cutting it out.
Bad weather. Now or later, anytime.
Today's show is brought to you by Black Diamond Equipment, with support from Maxim Ropes.
And the fine folks at La Sportiva. And don't forget our charter sponsor, Bonfire Coffee. Go to bonfirecoffee.com and enter Enorma at checkout for a discount on great coffee and to support the Enormocast.
And now back to the show.
Hello and welcome to the Enormocast. This is your host, Chris Kalous. It is October 3rd, 2020, 9:01 p.m. exactly. And this is episode 206 of the Enormocast, a conversation with alpinist Andres Marin, or Andres Marin. How many R's do I roll in that, Andres? Anyway, he never corrects me when I say his name, so he's a nice guy like that. Anyway, Andres is from Colombia originally, but he's been in the U.S., Colorado mostly, a bit of time in Washington for almost 20 years. And we get down and dirty on this one, talking climbing. This is a really climbing-centric podcast. I've done a couple where we've diverted quite a bit lately. Talking with Alexis Krauss last time about music, and I had to stop myself from just pumping her for stories about the sights, the sounds, the smells of a hardworking rock and roll band on the road. And, with Favia Dubik, we got down into the cancer world and got pretty heavy into that. But this one, man, we just talk about climbing. So if you like talking about climbing, or at least listening to people talk about climbing, in the case of a podcast where you can't participate, this is your jam. And actually, we recorded 2 sessions for this one. We recorded one, and then we wanted to actually add a couple things, talk a little bit more about a kind of a heavy-duty topic that we get to in the end. And I ended up, basically getting 2 podcasts out of that. And I worked and worked to try to kind of get them smaller, but then I was like, fuck it. You guys are adults, mostly adults, and you have an attention span. I mean, Joe Rogan goes on for 3 hours most of the time. Like, please, talking in circles. So here's a great big, very climbing-centric interview with Andres Marin. And the fact is that his voice, his accent, his Colombian accent, it's like a warm breeze, like a tropical breeze. It's like a warm breeze, like a tropical breeze that has come down from the mountains and swept across the beaches of your mind. Just feel it. Sit back. Relax into it. Colombia. Okay, back to a less soothing sound of my voice. I do want to do a quick commercial for myself, actually. I want to invite you over to The Runout, which is a podcast I'm doing with Andrew Bisharat. A little bit different than this one, more topic-based and more banter, I guess. If you like the TAPS episodes, the yearly, whatever you call those, it's a little bit more like that, but there's some guests, things like that. So come on over and check it out. A little bit more of my personality, I think, in that one. So I don't know, maybe you get plenty of my personality here in the rambly intros. Got an email. Somebody just said, hey, I like the rambly intros. They're almost my favorite part. So there, one person likes them. Okay, enough rambly intro for today. Let's get to the interview. Andres Marin, good climber, great voice. So Tradsters, tell me who loves you more than Black Diamond. Wait, your mom? Give me a break. She may be good for a warm meal and an emergency check when the Sprinter turbo shits the bed. But when did your mom ever reduce your rack weight by 30% with a still futuristic cam like the Ultralight Camelot? In the last 5 years, Black Diamond has refined and redesigned their cams over and over to give you the best protection money can buy. And now, guess what? They took the venerable C3 and X4 and replaced them with the Z4. Wait, what? Just listen. The likes of Hazel Finley and Carla Traversi helped with these from the ground up. Get it? And then Hazel sent Magic Line just to prove their worth. So are they only good for 514? Of course not. They're good whenever you need a low-profile, hard-sticking cam that won't wobble around in your hand like a slippery hot dog when you pull the trigger. So go to blackdiamondequipment.com or your favorite local shop to check out the Z4, the latest in a continuing tradition of cam refinement from the climber engineers at Black Diamond. Tell them your mom sent you.
Now, what did Bridwell? It was like something like that, where they had like a biscuit sponsor or something like that.
I think, I might be wrong, but like when those guys went to try like the spider face or whatever in Nupse, I think it was sponsored by like Camel cigarettes and Jack Daniels too.
Right, yeah.
And you can see like his patches and smoking a cigarette at like 8,000 meters or something like that, and you're like, what? It's like, dude, that's badass, like talking about like a sponsor and a style of doing things. Like, wow.
Have you ever seen that? There's like a poster of it's around of the guys in the Tour de France like trading smokes while they're riding.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Because
they used to think it like opened your lungs.
Yeah,
like that it was like this helped you get oxygen.
Yeah, allows you to like paddle faster.
Yeah,
the more you smoke.
Helps, yeah.
Oh yeah.
But there was also, in those days they were probably also taking, snorting cocaine at the rest stops too. Yeah, for sure. Because
Marco Pantani.
Who's that?
Marco Pantani was like one of the most influential kind of like new age cyclist, and man, that guy was just like full party. Like full. There is a really cool documentary. I think it's called Pantani, or I Am Pantani, or I Am Marco Pantani, or something like that. But man, like it was, the lines of coke was probably like from this side of the table to over there, and then the next day he was just like running the mountain stage of the Tour de France and kicking everyone's ass and all that. And people were like, what are you doing? Yeah.
They weren't testing yet for this thing.
Totally.
I would imagine. Yeah. Well, it's interesting. Someone was just telling me, do you follow cycling at all?
I should follow more cycling, since like
the Colombians
cycling
are kicking
is like,
ass right now.
Exactly.
Right?
Like cycling is basically like the second, sport in Colombia.
Right, to football.
So, and there is so many like superstars who are coming from Colombia and all that I should follow more, but not really. I'm like kind of like a fair weather fan.
Yeah.
You know, whenever like the Tour de France or the Giro d'Italia or something like that, then I start watching.
Are there other races in cycling? Because I didn't think there was. There's just like that one, right?
No,
and
I
then
think
everyone
it's-
goes home and waits until the Tour de
Yeah.
France the next year.
No, I think it's like the Vuelta a España, Giro d'Italia, and Tour de France are kind of like you have a name. It's something like the classics or something
Yeah.
like that. But there is like a bunch of other
No,
races.
just
you know.
joking.
So
But I'm the same way. Like the only thing I know about cycling is Tour de France, and
yeah,
someone just happened to mention to me that there's Colombians that just did really well. Is the tour over? I think it is over.
I don't know.
Yeah,
Is
see,
it?
that's where we're at. We're in rifles, so we have no idea what's going on in the world. Or at least you guys don't.
I don't. Yeah,
Yeah.
like there is no like cell phone reception or anything like that, which it makes this place like quite special because of that. You know.
Yeah, it's funny because, it's special, but then everybody like has to drive in and out to like deal with it too. It's
That's
kind of
true.
like in the creek where, I don't know if you still can, but you used to like be able to find a bar by the sign, by the toilet or something, and you'd literally see people like walking around with their cell phones in the sky.
Oh yeah,
Like,
totally. Yeah,
trying to
yeah,
get
yeah.
like just enough to pop a text in and out
Right.
or whatever. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, I mean, it is interesting here. And actually, this weekend I was here and I was like, God, I wonder if these people even know that RBG died. You know, Ruth Bader Ginsburg,
Right.
Because I think it was sort of announced late on Friday, and I was like here
Yeah.
on Sunday thinking like, there's people just blissfully here, not knowing that she's gone.
Yeah.
Not caring either, but in some cases. But I also remember, that reminds me of when Honnold free-sold El Cap. That also happened on like either a weekend day, or it was like announced right up against a weekend. And then I came here and I was climbing in the morning and I realized that everybody around me had no idea because they'd spent the night. And I was just like, hey, everybody, you're not going to believe what happened. I just like basically felt like I rode through the canyon with like megaphone, just like, Alex Honnold free-sold El Capitan. Put your gree-grees down. What you're doing is meaningless.
80 feet of me means
Nothing.
nothing right now.
This is actually your second appearance on the Enormocast.
Is it?
Yeah.
Is it the second or the third?
Have you been on 3 times?
I think one time we did one and something happened with like the record button or something, and
Yeah,
or
well,
something like that.
yeah, because I can't. I did 2 Red Rocks ones, and one of them like disappeared, and the other one didn't. But there's a fan, and he knows who he is, who oft quotes you. So it must have gotten out there at some point. I can't remember how, but. Because he quotes you from the Enormocast as you said that don't ever pass up a chance to shut the fuck up.
Yeah.
Was your line that he quotes.
Yeah.
And so maybe he was there. I don't know, because one of those failed and the other one went out into the world. That was the early days, man. I was just winging it. I mean, not that these things can't still fail, but I just blew the recording, and like I was in the middle of it, and like I could see that the recording was not working, but there was an audience, so it was like, what
You
was
just
I gonna
went
do?
for it.
So I
You're like,
was
just
well,
keep on going.
yeah. I mean, it was for the audience anyway, but
Right.
It just goes. I actually kind of stopped doing live podcasts at events because generally the AV support is absolutely terrible. And so it's like I show up and there's like no one knows how anything works and where I plug in, and there's nobody around, and I was just like, I'm over this shit. So because it's hard enough to like run a show that's live on stage, and then also you, the person recording it, like
Totally.
Terry Gross does not have to do that on Fresh Air. Like she's not also running the board.
She have a full team behind
exactly.
her just doing everything, and she just needs to sit there and like, chat
And
with
do the
people
thing.
and all that. Yeah,
like
totally.
anyway.
Yeah.
So anyhow, somehow it got out there. So you've been on the show in some capacity. At least this guy dreamt it up that you were on the show. But that is a quote that you've uttered, correct?
Yeah, it is a quote that actually I learned from Special Forces, working with the Special Forces group.
Okay.
Yeah.
Are you allowed to talk about this?
Yeah, like
Okay.
in I used to guide. I don't really do guiding as much anymore, but in one point I did a couple, basically like cold weather training with these Special Forces teams, like tier 1 groups and all that. And we were on this classroom, and those guys were joking and one thing and another. And then the leader or the the cadre of this group is like, like, hey, you guys, remember to never like pass the chance to shut the fuck up. It was like his way of like telling people to like
shut the fuck up.
Shut the fuck up, because we were like doing like all these like avalanche awareness and like winter environment, winter camping, and one thing and another. We were like ice climbing and all that stuff. So we needed to like get going with the curriculum and all that. And that stuck to me, and it really is like, it's a harsh way to say things, but it makes total sense.
Right.
And I tell myself oftentimes that it's like, hey, dude, like just listen to people more so than talk.
Right.
So, yeah.
Yeah. And you spent how many years guiding?
Oh man, like from maybe, let's see, I moved to United States in 2000, at the end of 2002. So from 2003 to maybe 3 years ago, full time, like starting from like putting boots away and coiling ropes all the way to guiding pretty big objectives in places like Peru and Alaska and other places. So it was kind of like a neat, like part of my life when I look back and I'm like, oh man, like, how many times I have summited Mount Rainier?
I know.
Take a guess. Take a wild guess.
13.
No, dude. Actually, I just went
113.
No, not quite. I just went back to the North Cascades to do some gear testing for TNF and for Petzl, and I did my 98th summit to Mount Rainier, dude. 98 times.
That seems pretty like playing the odds. Like shit falls off. Like just random bad shit happens on that mountain, doesn't it? Like,
oh, dude,
things collapse and fall off, and rocks fall, and
I mean, it's crazy. Mount Rainier, the last time I was there last month, and we actually had a close call with rockfall, and I was like sitting down and thinking about this, like how many times I personally went by through all these objective hazards. That, by the way, there is other people who have summited this mountain over 500 times, dude.
Right.
The percentage of people who get hurt or die on the mountain is actually quite low. When you think about it, the amount of people who climb the mountain. So at the end of my time over there, I was so over it, to be totally honest. Beautiful mountain, amazing people. I met like really good friends forever and all that, and I learned a ton. But oh my God, dude, like that is just the next level. It's like imagine if you are climbing like X-rated something, but instead of climbing, you're walking.
Right.
And it's rocks coming down, and it's ice coming down, and it's crevasses, and then you're tied to people who have never wear crampons before, and you're like, all right. I used to joke that it's called a walk and hope. Oh, right. You're walking with people, and you're hoping that no one falls, because otherwise we all going to the bottom of like a crevasse,
Right. Yeah, those theoretical things around belaying a rope team are fairly theoretical.
Man.
And history has proven that they're very theoretical.
Yeah, like you don't have to be a mathematician or a physics guy to figure it out, the odds. And I suck at physics and mathematics, but when you put like, over 300 pounds or over 400 pounds on my weight, I weigh 150 pounds. When you crunch those simple numbers, you know that you have no chance on hell to stop anyone, dude. You're all going to a crevasse, and most likely you're going to end up in South America or something like that. Those holes are so deep that you're like, yeah, whatever, walk and hope. This is beautiful. First summit for everyone. High fives. You're like, oh boy.
You have former clients listening to this like,
oh man,
you said it would work. No, I never said that, actually.
Dude.
I tied it in, but I never said anything about why we were tying in. I just let you believe that this rope was there for some reason.
Right. It's like when you climb, or you ice climb, or like alpine climb, or like when you trad climb, and you have placed like a bunch of psychological pieces, and you just place them just to make yourself feel better, and you're like, oh yeah, now I'm good to go. Yeah. But you're like, no, fuck, I'm not good to go. No. I'm not good to go at all. Like I'm going to the ground.
Yeah, you got to lie to yourself. That's what guiding's all about, right?
Yeah.
Guiding those big mountains.
Right.
So you were up there for a long time.
Yeah, I was there I was working in the Cascades for close to 9 years or something like that.
Yeah. Right on.
Yeah.
So let's do the Colombia thing, because this is actually we've known each other a long time, actually.
A very long time.
Yeah. We climbed in the creek. I mean,
Right.
15 years ago at least, right? Like,
Yeah.
At least late aughts
Totally.
would been. I remember climbing the Colombian. What was that route out on the Scarface? Like
The Colombian Hitman.
Yeah,
Oh,
Colombian
yeah.
Hitman.
Classic,
Yeah,
man.
I remember climbing that with you, actually.
Yeah.
And that was a long time ago. So, yeah, I mean, and we've sort of like orbited one another, climbed together a little bit way back then. And, and then we just see each other at these damn festivals and things like that and coming through town. But I've never really figured out, two things. You're not from around here. You're from Colombia originally. I don't know if anyone can tell that by listening to you. But, and the other thing is you must, I mean, my attempts to have you sent back to Colombia have met with, I don't know what kind of red tape gets in the way, but I've called the government, like, I'm just like, something's keeping you here. So you said you came in 2002, which you're 37 now, so you weren't a kid. So how'd you end up in the U.S. from Colombia?
Yeah, so I went to high school in Colombia, and I went to part of college in Colombia. My mom moved to United States.
Okay.
I was raised by my mom, and I have an older sister. And then she met someone, and then they moved to Grand Junction, Colorado.
Okay.
And I had the opportunity to move to United States. You know, I wasn't really the best student out there. So my mom, at one point, I was like, all right, you need to get going with something, and I was like, well, let's go to United States, and see what happens. The trick with that is, like, I came here about a year and a half after 9/11.
Okay.
So it was like, for me, when I landed I went from Bogota to, I think it was Houston or something like that. And back then it was like military police around the airport. I don't know if you remember that, like it was like full on, and coming from Colombia. So Colombia is like the closest, or back then it was the closest country to United States who were fighting some sort of war, So when the whole idea of war on terror after 9/11 went like global, Colombia was the closest one. So like it was a lot of things going down in Colombia, and in a super weird way, it was the best thing that happened to Colombia, or one of the best things to happen to Colombia. It was like 9/11, believe it or not, just because the government focused so much time and resources and effort to basically like eradicate the insurgent group in Colombia. And back then the president was all about like George Bush kind of plans against the war on terror,
Right.
And now, anyhow, fast forward to now, is amazing. Colombia have changed. I mean, it's like 360 degrees, man. Is like when I started climbing in Colombia, there was just a few climbers.
Right.
You don't go to the mountains, it was like no man's land over there. Like you just don't do it. Rock climbing was the same way. It was basically like the tourism or the outdoor recreation. It was non-existent.
Right. Yeah, because I mean it was no man's land between what is it, the FARC or all that, and then also the narco trade. It's stay the fuck out of the mountains.
Oh,
like,
dude,
yeah,
It was crazy. I mean, I grew up like seeing like bombs and like crazy stuff, like as a kid into a teenager and to an adult and all that. It was like, it was full on, back then in Colombia was considered in one point, Colombia was considered the most dangerous place in the planet, so anyhow, and I moved to United States, and my welcome to United States is like, oh, you're coming from Colombia, you're a male, you are between this age and this age. It's like, they put you like in a room, take all your clothes off, and like full pat down. I was like, oh wow, welcome to United States. I was like, this is crazy.
This is crazy, and Americans have really cold hands.
Totally, dude. But man, like fast forward, that's almost like 17 years. I think it was the best thing for me. It's amazing, dude, like how in life you make these decisions and one thing lead to another and you get to meet all these wonderful people and all these good opportunities. And I look back, which every day, I take the moment to be thankful for these opportunities and the people and all that. And it's just so cool, man.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you were a climber in Colombia before you landed in Houston.
Yeah.
Yeah. How did that happen?
So my first mountain experience, I was in my last year of high school. So in Colombia, we only have 11 years, different than here, which is 12 years.
And where did you live?
In Ibagué.
Okay.
Ibagué, Colombia is in the central mountain range, like nearby the coffee zone.
Okay.
And we had a volcano, or we still have a volcano. It haven't exploded yet.
Right.
But a friend of mine is like, hey, you want to go climb this mountain? And I remember lying to my mom to where I'm going to go. I'm like, I'm going to go to my friend's house for a couple of days, Sure enough, we went and we climbed this mountain, which is, is 5,000 plus meters. Mm-hmm. We didn't have any idea about cramponing or glacier travel or avalanche awareness, none of that,
right.
And somehow we made it to the summit and came back down. And from that point on, I was like, oh, this is really cool. And then I started rock climbing a little bit. When I went to college in Bogota, there is this area called Suezca, which is like the main place for rock climbing. And I did a little bit of rock climbing there. And then I moved. And then when I end up here, I was like, I end up in Grand Junction, which have actually pretty good rock climbing. The monument is around and all that. And I actually find this place through a friend of mine who used to climb here a lot. So I was working at jobs and driving to rifle to rock climbing rifle. So it's pretty cool. Rifle to me, even there is a place that I haven't really spent that much time in the past 17 years. Every time that I come here, it's kind of like a special place. It takes me back to the beginning, I guess. Still pretty hard. Still I have to project call cuts for a week before I can send the route and be like, oh yeah, now
it's a warm up again.
Now it's a warm up again,
Right. Yeah, totally. I know that feeling, and I fucking live here. But yeah, I mean, marching up and down Rainier isn't going to get you in shape for rock climbing and rifle anyway. So
no, not at all.
If you dip in like that, it's pretty rough.
Yeah.
So, but you've been here for a bit this trip.
Yeah, I've been here for the silver lining about this year, I guess. All the expeditions got canceled. So I was like, hey, let's just focus on rock climbing because I haven't done that in a long time.
Right.
And I've been here in and out since June. Mm-hmm. And it's September now? I've been here for a long time. And I'm still projecting cold cuts 3 months later.
No, you're not.
So, yeah.
Well, let me go back to the. I'm kind of curious about Colombia, because I went there. I don't know. It was probably 6-7 years ago. Before Miles was born, for sure. Went to Suezca and a couple other crags, kind of local to there.
Yeah.
And then went over to the plateau to. God, what's it called?
Macheta?
Yeah. No, Macheta, we went there too, but no, the Richie and Alex's Refugio La Roca. La Mojara.
Oh, La Mojara. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Went over to there.
Yeah.
And what you just said about the difference between, the Colombia we sort of knew about when I was younger, and again, everything we obviously knew about was the drug stuff and the narcos and Escobar and all that sort of thing. And then I was just super impressed actually. And having traveled in South America to various different countries and just kind of, it seemed really sort of modern and on the up, and talking with the owners of that refugio in particular, some of the changes that had been made, not just, with the FARC, but also having had to quell these paramilitary groups that had been, created to fight them, but that had kind of become these mafia group kind of things, and how it all was sort of kind of clearing itself up, and it felt, like I said, it felt really modern. And I was super impressed. I was like, man, this is like a country I could actually live in, actually. And we only saw a little teeny slice of it.
Right.
But, and then you just look around at guidebooks, not climbing, but just, travel guidebooks, and it's an incredible place. Like the different, you've got beaches and mountains, and big mountains like 5,000 meters is not small. Yeah. So it was a cool place.
Yeah, it's pretty sweet, man, and the people are awesome.
Yeah, we found that too.
Yeah.
Colombia
was, and to an extent, right now, still, on in war on a different scale, like a much smaller scale. But
Right.
Colombia is the country who's been the longest on fighting some sorts of war in the modern history or modern world, I guess. 60 years of that. So people really, really appreciate their time and their freedom, quote unquote,
Right.
and their time with their families, and people are super happy over there and upbeat, and it's cool, man. It's something that coming to a country like this where you can go and do as you please, it definitely put things into perspective for sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we thought the climbing community was great. We went everywhere we went. They were psyched to see us as Americans, and they just wanted to show off their cliffs and
totally,
it was super fun trip, and we only sort of it was 3 weeks or something like that, so we had just this little taste. But had a really good time, and would definitely like to go back. And the other cool thing about going to all those places is you don't have a damn jet lag.
No, you're talking about an hour,
exactly.
or so it's it's nothing.
And it's super close. I remember when we flew down there, it was just kind of I felt okay, I had in my head the full on, okay, this is an international flight, it's here we go, get settled in for the long haul to Europe or whatever. And it's just I got about settled in, and it was just bing.
Yeah, you're
hey,
you're
we're
there.
we're gonna land. I was oh yeah, you look at a map and it's kind of it's right there by Florida, because we hopped through Miami or whatever. Yeah. So it's a cool place, and I definitely recommend anybody who wants kind of expedition light sort of rock climbing trip is it's a cool place. But where else is there to climb besides those two places?
Oh man, there is a ton of different places, especially nowadays. There is this cave that a good friend of mine has been developing. There is just so much climbing to be done over there. It's not a world-class place per se, but like you mentioned, just to go for the adventure and a new place to go is super, super cool.
What drew you into guiding then when you did you're futzing around in Grand Junction, Colorado, which is funny, Colombian kid just hey, why don't you come and move to Grand Junction, Colorado?
So
hello. And everybody's oh god, another Mexican guy. You're no,
it's Colombia. Where is Colombia? What part of Mexico is Colombia?
Exactly.
It's oh man, it's so crazy. So I studied in Colombia, the time that I spent in a university there. I studied percussion and sound engineering.
Okay.
Actually, so when I moved to Grand Junction, I wanted to keep going with that. But then I realized that a lot of my credits didn't really transfer, and my English back then it wasn't really that good. So I really needed to start from the very, very beginning. And I was oh man, that sounds like a lot of work. And through climbing with friends and stuff, I learned about the AMGA, going to guide school.
Mm-hmm.
And I was oh, that sounds pretty cool, climbing and guiding and all that. So I started taking courses and exams and one thing and another, and literally just one thing led to another, and I started guiding a lot and learning the craft of guiding. And I actually was in Grand Junction, then I started guiding in Washington, and I got a gig to start guiding in Uray, ice guiding over there, So one of my very first days of guiding in Uray for San Juan Mountain Guides, this guy, Clint Cook, good friend of mine, he basically offered me a job. And my first season basically was putting boots away and coiling ropes, But it was really cool back then because Jeff Lowe is still around. He was kind of the guy, or he was one of the most instrumental climbers to start the ice park and all that. So back then he's still ice climbing and all that. And to be honest, I didn't know who Jeff Lowe was. So it was really cool to see the Jeff Lowe guy. And he's like, hey, put these boots away and coil these ropes. And I was like, and the fuck is this guy who tells me to do all this all the time, you know? And Mike O'Donnell and all these like all-time, you know, ice climbers. And I learned a ton from those guys. And it was really, really neat, you know? One of my actually very first like guiding gigs, it was for Lynn Hill. So Lynn Hill and I took a course, a guiding course, believe it or not. She needed to take this course for insurance purposes. Mm-hmm. So I end up like taking this AMGA course with her, and in one point I'm like climbing Calypso in Eldo, right? And then my instructor back then
for those that are not initiated, that's like 5'7", 5'6", 5'7".
Totally, yeah. So I'm like playing guide, you know, and like my instructor is right there with me in the anchor, and then he's like, hey, part of guiding is like you need to like coach, you know, tell people like what they are doing good and all that. And I'm like looking down on Lynn and I'm like, hey Lynn, I think you need to improve a little bit more on your footwork and all that, you know. And it was hilarious, dude. Like the instructor, he was just like laughing, and Lynn was looking at me like, what the fuck? He's just like laughing too. And I'm like, good job. Yeah, you look a little gripped in there, so I want you to relax a little bit and all that. So she's like, hey, like you wanna help out on this like climbing camp that she was doing. Mm-hmm. And I met Craig Leuven through there, you know. And I was starting to climb in the desert a little bit, and I knew about Craig Leuven, so I was like, oh, Craig's like, wow, you know, I like working with him and all that. So like one thing led to another, you know, and I clicked with Craig really well, and we started climbing like off-wheats and all that. And one of the most amazing times that I had in Indian Creek actually was like a season with him over there where we climb all the off-wheats on big bros only, you know, like no camps, no anything. It's just like putting big bros.
That's like free soloing.
Pretty much,
only
dude.
Harder, like because you have to stop and place
and
things.
place those fucking tubes.
Yeah,
and
plus
I'm
they're
like,
clanking
oh
on
my
you.
God, dude! And like you kick one thing and they fell down, and the other thing like kick the other thing, and you all of a sudden you're like, I'm gonna die, you know, like I'm gonna fucking die right now. So, but we spent.
All right. Yeah. Wait. We got to keep going on that track,
right?
Because I love that story, and I think actually I camped with you guys and with Craig, and I think it was the whole family. I think it was Sylvia and Julia and him, and I think we were all camped in the Super Bowl or something together. Because I have a really nice picture of Craig with Julia on his shoulders. But we got to go back to that. But
all right,
have you ever taken a whipper, a full on above the bro whipper onto a big bro?
You know, I have fallen on big bros, but it wasn't like the full on like 10 feet above it, and I'm like, I'm going.
No, how about just feet above it?
Oh yeah, like 3 or 4 or 5 feet. But you know, it's off with climbing. You're like, you're there, and all of a sudden you are just sliding down. So it's kind of like friction because you have like half of your body inside of the crack. So like friction helps a little bit with that.
Right.
I did watch Craig taking an upside down full on fall on a big bro on this really in the catwalk. It's called the mousetrap, like full on. I was just belaying the guy, and he's like placing big bros, and all of a sudden his feet are over his head, and he's like in, and all of a sudden he's not in, and Craig was a pretty big guy.
Yeah, no,
right?
he wasn't small.
Was like,
right.
And I was like, all right, there we go. Like, what's gonna happen? 50-50. He's gonna end up like. I remember like, I have you, I'm going to catch you in the second bounce in the ground or something because I don't know if this thing's going to hold. And sure enough, they held. But till this day, dude, like every time I see a big bro, I'm like, oh my God, dude, like, thank God that they make these gigantic camps nowadays, you know. Black Diamond just came out with like, those big camps. So,
yeah. They're really big. I don't know if they get as big as the biggest big bro. That's a tongue twister for you. Big is the biggest big bro. Yeah. But they're damn close. Yeah. So, I mean, there's such this mythical thing, the big bro, among off-width climbers. And I've actually been searching for an eyewitness or an actual experience of someone whipping on a big bro. And I think you're the first guy that I've gotten both from, or either one of them.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, you know, you see... back then you were able to like find here and there the valley giants,
Right.
but they were super rare.
Yeah,
You know, like
yeah.
very. Like, they were probably like 5 or something in the world,
Right,
or
yeah,
in
'cause
the
they're
country, or
custom-made.
whatever.
Yeah, they were
or less than
custom-made,
that. And they were super expensive, and they were super heavy, and it wasn't the thing. And that was actually before Black Diamond used to make the number 6.
Yeah,
Because
'cause
Black Diamond only made the number 5.
Yeah.
And
It was
Wild
bigger than the
Country,
new number 5, but it wasn't as big as the 6.
correct.
Yeah.
And Wild Country used to make a number 6, but for some reason, Wild Country, it wasn't like number 6s weren't around.
Right.
Basically.
Yeah,
you know?
they just, there was no, I mean, they obviously did the market research, but it's just weird that they would make those giant cams because I just can't imagine they sell that many of them. But
Right.
apparently that it's worth it. Because, I mean, imagine the tooling that goes into creating something new like that.
Oh, man,
But,
yeah.
and I've always just, that's why, is because it's like no one likes to climb these things. But then, you know, somewhere, I don't know, about a decade ago, it became cool to climb off-withs.
Oh, it
And
became
here we are.
totally cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And actually, you're one of the first guys, and I know Craig always was too, but I never climbed with Craig. You're the first guy I climbed with that could like legitimately like scamper up gnarly off-withs. And that's kind of like it was way back at sort of the beginning of kind of the revolution that started, not that you started it, but it was sort of gaining steam. I mean, that was probably like 10 or 15 years ago. And now it's like this totally cool thing.
Yeah. No, back then I think that the off-with aficionados were like a handful of people.
Sure.
I think.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
everyone else is like off-with, like, oh my God, we don't want nothing to do with that, you know?
And the other thing that really didn't exist even then that much or maybe at all was like these inverted kind of things.
No.
Because I don't remember, and I know that none of the old kind of lube and test pieces were really anything weird like that. It was more of the old, just the struggle squeeze kind of climbing and stacking and stuff like that.
Right.
But the big upside down thing didn't come in until later either.
Yeah, I think it was like maybe like Lucille in Viravu
Yep.
and then Belly Full of Bad Berries and
So
Blood
really
from Another Planet or something like that. That was kind of like the few things that you actually like
had to get
full on like upside down and
exactly.
all that.
And that really, you're talking about there's Scarpelli and that. Is
Right.
Brad Jackson, is that his name?
Yeah.
So there really were just these handful of dudes here in the West, like doing these crazy off with cracks as like a thing. But anyway, so back to your story and talking about meeting Craig and and just being in Uray and kind of like, making these connections with these guys.
Yeah.
So, I mean, just continue on. You're guiding, you're super getting into ice climbing. The other thing, we were just talking about the off-with thing, is that 2002, that's when you moved here. So this was only a few years later.
Yeah.
And so there's also like the 2000s was a big revolution in ice climbing, I think.
Totally.
As well, in terms of gear, because here you are talking about like meeting Jeff Lowe, who had created a revolution 20 years earlier,
Right.
with gear, but now suddenly like gear was really sort of catching up and making ice climbing something that wasn't just a brutal knuckle bashing nightmare every time you went. So talk about like the interest you had in that, because you're all over the place, but one of the things that you really got into obviously was ice climbing.
Yeah, I think it just between spending time on the Pacific Northwest in the summertime and like in the desert in the spring and autumn, and then the winter time in Uray, it was like my circuit,
Right.
And talking about people that I met, maybe the second winter that I spent in Uray, I met this guy Guy Lassell. Guy Lassell is like, for whoever doesn't know or who's listening out there who doesn't know Guy Lassell is basically the most prolific ice climber and soloist out there, So for me, as a like new ice climber, I used to see this guy Guy Lassell like soloing, because he used to spend about a month or so in Uray, kind of like in the beginning of the winter to like get ready for the Canadian season, because he was from Canada, French Canadian guy. And I remember just seeing the guy, like this guy who looked super old. His helmet was always like in the back. I don't know why he wore a helmet, because he like, if you see a photo of him, his helmet was always in the back. But he was always like soloing things, and I'm like, whoa, this is crazy. And he had like prototypes, because he used to work for Petzl, so he had like the latest and greatest. And back then, like ice climbing was like even in guiding, it's like you solo everything,
Yeah, because the screws are, you put it, there's all psychological.
Oh, yeah, totally. Yeah. So I grew up, or my ice climbing career, I grew up learning to like, you first of all, you never fall, obviously, and you still, nowadays, you don't fall, but you solo all the time. And I was just like, like soloing around, and I clicked really well with Guy Lassalle, this like world-class climber, and he took me under his wing, and we were like climbing together, soloing together, and like mixed climbing, which we did use ropes for that. So it was kind of like it was a really neat time of my life, just learning from someone like Craig and Guy Lassalle and all those, like iconic kind of figures on their own sport. So it was really neat, by the way, those guys they basically introduced, because Craig Lewin used to be a really good ice climber, and those guys brought ice climbing. They somewhat discovered ice climbing in China, and with this guy, Stéphane Husson. So they went on this huge expedition, put like all kinds of crazy first ascents and all that, and Craig and Guy Lassalle, they actually died the same year.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Craig in August and Guy in December.
Right, and Guy was at the Bozeman Ice Fest, is that right? Yeah, and got wiped out by an avalanche.
Yeah. But anyhow, talking about my journey is just really being on the right time and the right place, I guess, and learning from amazing people and just being inspired by them and many others, and just being stoked, put your time and do it over and over and over again. The first expedition that I went to, like big expedition abroad, I started like climbing in Alaska because I was guiding Denali. So either before or after the Denali trip, I used to do a personal trip in Alaska. But then my first like big expedition was in Kyrgyzstan in 2010. Mm-hmm. We went to Kyrgyzstan, and we went to this really cool area between Kyrgyzstan and China, which was a really crazy experience, because we thought that we had all these logistics all figured out, and then the logistics, this Russian logistical agency who were doing the logistics for us in Bishkek, they totally changed the price on us. And all of a sudden it went from like an affordable expedition. We got the Mock Stomp grant to go on this expedition. All of a sudden went to like this crazy number, like helicopter flights and all that. And back then I was like, no, we don't have money for that. So we basically end up like having to drive for 2 days, and then we rode horses for 4 days, dude, to base camp. I mean, by the time we got to base camp, we needed like close to like 5 days just to recover from I don't know, like that was my first time like riding horses for day after day for 4 days. I was destroyed, dude. Like my back, my kidneys, all my organs. I was so done,
So you basically like just said no to these Russian guys, and then had to just piece it together yourself, or did
Exactly.
Yeah,
we literally went from point A to point B, and then organized things to get to point C, and so on. Like we just like full on start making it.
Who was on the trip?
A good friend of mine, Philippe Willock. Yeah. And
see the Black Canyon, Philippe?
Yeah, the Ranger dude.
Right. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, we don't climb as much anymore. We just kind of went around ways and all that. But it was a great experience. And being up there with him was cool. And he had experience around the part of the world. So it was kind of like neat to have someone who's like, I got this, And we actually ended up climbing 2 new peaks. And one of them was like quite big face that we climbed. And that was the first time that I actually realized the danger that comes with like first ascent in the mountains. We climbed this pretty big face. We thought we were going to be able to drop down into China, because we literally were climbing these mountains that separates Kyrgyzstan and China. And to our surprise, we couldn't. Like we were looking the other side of the ridge, and it was like, there's no way we can go down. So we decided to like start traversing into this snow ledge, and I was in the front and I was putting some screws for like running belays and all that. And it was pretty late on the day. And an avalanche came down actually. And since we were like about 60 meters far apart, I guess, the avalanche came between us, pulled down on us just because we were connected to the rope. 2 screws fell and 1 screw held. And that's basically what saved our lives, you know. And we made it back down to base camp and all that. But that very first experience, it really came in a full throttle experience to me, you know, like, and I realized, I was like, oh shit, like this is full on. This is what
Right, it's not the ice park.
This is not an ice park, exactly. This is not like the schoolroom on the ice park, you know, or like Rider Vale or any of that. It's like, it's for real.
Would there have been a political problem with going down into China? Were you guys able to, was that you're coming from Kyrgyzstan and then you just pop over the border into China if you'd have turned up at some base camp down there?
Oh, we wouldn't be in a world of shit.
Okay.
Yeah. Because you're basically like crossing border with like, no.
Hello.
Yeah, it's like, hey, how's it going?
You're Colombian, but you live in the wait.
Can we have some tea, please? Yeah, no. We would be like in so much trouble, but
Right.
It's a super remote place and no one was around.
Okay.
But the geography really was like this side Kyrgyzstan, the other side China, you know. So right away for me, I was like, all right, this is the price. This is the potential price that you pay to climb in the mountains, especially like expeditionary style kind of things, you know, first ascent and all that. But man, I really liked it. And after that year, I just started going to expeditions, you know, like different places like Peru and Nepal and Pakistan and just as Alaska, obviously, that's kind of like one of the places that I call stomping
Let's go back there real quick before we move on to that. This idea that like that climb and that experience put that into your head. It's interesting, but not surprising that, you know, you at that point you had definitely known, you know, plenty of people who had died in the mountains, you know, already. At that point in your life, you guided around, you know, in the Alaska range, so you knew the potential, you know, in a remote way. But it's interesting that, you know, for us, it has to happen to you personally,
totally,
to like make it feel real or make it like. Well, I mean, I think one of the things climbers do, especially alpine climbers, is you just have this attitude that it's going to happen to somebody else, not because. Not you know.
Right.
You can't be thinking that every time you step in the mountains. So it just is interesting that, it's like all of a sudden, like, okay, here I am. I've seen it. I've heard about it. I know people, but it just about happened to me. And now I know, like, now I'm going to have to, like, think about the potential of danger of what's going on around me.
Right. It's like a first-hand experience. And once you get that, you're like, oh, wow, that just becomes, like, ingrained on you. You know, you're like, oh, wow, this is for real.
Yeah. Did it change the way you approach the mountains at all?
It didn't, but it did. It didn't in the sense that, like, now it's like, now I know what it takes in a way, you know, like.
So it didn't deter you? Yeah.
No, not at all. You know, like, I mean, I was super scared, don't get me wrong. And I was like, oh my God, this just happened to us. And like, what a reality check. But in the same time, I was like, hey, this is part of the deal, you know. And fast forward now to 2020, I have lost since then. I have lost, man, like over 16 friends,
right?
You know, and a lot of those were like super close to me, like best friends and all that. So it's a little bit of a love or hate with the mountains, you know. Like this is the place that I like to hang out and train for and go and explore and all that. But in the same time, I look around, I'm like, you know, I have photos of friends of mine and I have this little journal that I keep and yeah, a lot of these guys are gone.
Right.
You know, so that does take a toll because when you go to the mountains, you know, every step that you take, it could go either way, you know. So literally you are taking hundreds of decisions in one day that it could turn out into like a tragedy or a big accident or something like that, you know. But I guess that's life. You just keep going with it and be thankful for the people that you got to meet and what you learn from them, and carry that torch and hopefully like pass it to other generations and all that stuff. So, yeah.
So what do you, I mean, if you can't, you sound like maybe you keep a journal, or not maybe, let me say that again. So you keep a journal about these experiences. What is the draw then, do you think? Like what, have you ever, I mean, this is like the $1 million like climbing question,
right?
Of like, what's the fucking point? But, or, you know, what do you think it is that keeps you just wanting to go back?
And that is a good question, and I oftentimes ponder into that, and I don't really have an answer. You know, is just that's who I am. Mm-hmm. You know, and that's how many other people are too. You know, like the whole process of going to a remote place and doing the hike and the base camp and the advanced base camp and the conditions, and I don't know, the beautiful places that you get to be, and how like deep you have to dig into these situations, you know, when you literally are looking death in the eyes, I guess, you know, and you're like, all right, well, we're going to have to make it, you know, because oftentimes you have to go to the top in order to come back down. You know, there's like the whole saying of the point of no return is totally true. You know, there's some times when you're like, okay, we're going to start rappelling from here down. And other times you just don't have the gear to like start rappelling and be like, oh yeah, we're going to be down in base camp, you know? So I think is part of that level of commitment is what really keeps me going back. But I think it's just the journey of it all that is just, I found it like super, super fulfilling, you know, like it's just, that's who I am, I guess.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, I was thinking about what you just said with, you know, this avalanche that was almost an accident, almost the end of you, you know, with the two ice screws failing. I think it's like interesting. A lot of times when you're super exhausted, there's this weird relationship starts with fear and with like danger. You kind of like, I don't know, it's like hard to explain. I don't even know if I'll leave this in here, but like, I've been in situations where stuff has happened where I would have normally been like completely, you know, terrified. And I was just like so exhausted that you're just like, well, that just happened, you know, like.
Totally, dude. Absolutely. You're like, oh, wow, we almost got taken down. It's like, oh, fuck it. Let's just keep on going, you know.
I mean, it's like hour 20 and we got to just fucking keep going, you know.
Should we make some water?
Yeah,
you know,
right.
Like,
it's pretty interesting. And it's almost like there can be this revelation later. And I've actually heard literally about that where people, you know, wake up later.
Yeah.
Weeks later.
Totally.
Terrified or whatever, or something like that.
Yeah.
And again, even in like the minor things that I've dealt with, and, you know, I've got my own stories, but yeah, just like this weird exhaustion of like, well, that happened, or like, well, you know, at least we'd have been able to stop, you know, or whatever.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's like sometimes you're so in the moment that once you get removed or you are removed from that situation and you actually get to like dive deep into that and you actually realize the scale of what you went through, or like the emotion that went through that, then you actually like, oh wow, this is just happened, you know. It's and usually that happens to me either in base camp or when I'm go back to whatever, Talkeetna or Islamabad or Kathmandu or when I'm even back at home, you know. Right. And I'm like, wow, like, damn, that this just happened, you know, and we totally walked away from this deal. And sometimes actually I get, not too often, but I do get nightmares, you know, like go back to those moments or like revive those situations, and you're like, whoa, like wake up, and you're like, what just happened, you know? So, but that's just part of the deal, I guess, and that's just, we all choose our own journeys, and some of the journeys are different than others, and that's just, yeah, that's just how it goes.
How long ago was it that you went to the Trango, the Great Trango Tower?
That was in 2018.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
and it was a quite interesting story because so Anna Faf, which is part of a friend of mine and part of the North Face team, that was kind kind of like a dream of her to climb that.
Okay.
You know, and I wanted to go to India, actually, to alpine climbing. And she's been on this area in India that I wanted to go. So talking with her about India, she's like, hey, I'm going to go to the Triangle Towers. Would you like to come? And I'm like, every time that I think about like B-wall, rock climbing, A climbing, all that, just like all my body aches.
Right.
You know, like I think about like sitting on a harness for hours and hours and hours. And I'm like, that's kind of totally like the opposite of what I have kind of like developed or focused from the past 10 years, you know. And I was like, the first time it was a hard no. I was like, no, thank you. Like that just sounds like suffering, you know. And the videos that I have watched is like the Russian guys up there and the Norwegian pillar dudes, you know, the Norwegian guys up there. I was like, no way.
Well, you'd never want to watch the Russians. Because those guys, like, they just suffer for suffering's sake.
That's totally true. But in the same time, it's like they give you kind of like inspiration, you know, like whenever you think is bad, you're like, do you remember the movie when the Russians are like suffering? It's like, we have it pretty good, you know.
We're
like,
not even getting close to the Slovenians, let alone the Russians.
Yeah. So then, like, this trip to India didn't really happen just because the whole, like, area where I wanted to go, it was just like political, unstable, and one thing and another. So then it was another chance for me to join Anna and David Alfrey, because David was on this trip. So I was like, yeah, let's go.
Dave will take care of all that.
He'll
take care of all that wall climbing business.
Oh, man, he's just so good at that.
Right.
So we went to Yosemite, and it was like a full-on crash course on like how to do short fixing and like speed climbing and one thing and another. And learning from him, it was like super, super awesome. You know, like we had these prototypes of the inflatable portal edges, and one of them wasn't really holding the air. So I was like, I remember what I don't like to like B-wall climbing, you know, like, but it was really cool to like just get a full-on modern B-wall climbing like mentorship from him, and we went and we climbed in Yosemite, and then we ended up going to the Triangle Towers, you know, and it was really cool. Like Jonathan Schaefer and Pete Fassel joined us for that expedition.
Jonathan who?
Schaefer.
Huh.
Right.
Yeah, I never. Okay.
Yeah, talking about under the radar guys.
He's gonna be pissed. Yeah, he's gonna be pissed that his name even came up on here.
And the crazy part is,
take that out of there. I don't exist.
Dude, those guys put a huge new route on the Hannahbrook North, and you will never hear.
Yeah, I never heard of it.
I mean, there is people who have gotten probably the Piolet d'Or for pretty amazing ascents, but not quite. I mean, when I was looking, because the Hannahbrook North is right across from base camp, and you look at that thing, you're like, oh my God, dude, it looks as impressive as any of the walls over there, you know?
Well, it's funny, like there's all through actually the history of climbing, there's been these climbers that emerge that there's rumors about like what they actually do for a living, and if they're like spies or like CIA guys or whatever. And I mean, I know he's like, he does construction and like, I think, and just pieces stuff together, but he also reminds me of one of those guys where you're just like, well, who is that? Like, what is he actually doing? Like before we started talking on the mics, we were talking about how like climbing stories get bigger and bigger and more fantastical and heroic as they get told over the years. And I feel like Schaefer will be one of those guys that, I'm pretty sure he was like, you know, like British Secret Service or something like that. And like, oh no, that dude was total CIA. For sure,
totally.
100%.
Yeah. Like some like Russian or German spy or something like that. But I mean, it was cool, man. Like watching those guys climbing that route was fun, and we did our own fair amount of like climbing too. You know, we basically like our goal, it was to climb the Great Triangle Tower, acclimatize in the Great Triangle Tower in the 1984 route. You know, which we did, and it's a route that is like a little bit of a mixed climbing and like low angle ice and snow and this crazy summit that you have to do. So technically speaking, it's not the hardest things, but it's like super exposed the
Right.
whole time.
Right.
Really, really exposed. So we did that, and then we went and we did the Eternal Flame on the Nameless Tower or the Trango Tower.
Okay, let's clear all that up.
Yeah.
So there's the Trango, there's Nameless, Great. Which ones are which? What is the deal? Like those aren't. There isn't like Trango, Great Trango, and Nameless. Is there 3 towers?
No. Well, so the Massif
Right.
itself, the Trango
Right.
Massif, we have. Let me see if I remember this correctly. Have like 4 summits.
Okay.
So you have the Great Trango Tower, you have the Trango Monk, which is like a tower within
Right.
the Massif, and then you have the Nameless Tower, which is technically the Trango Tower. It's not the Great Trango Tower, but it's the Trango Tower.
That's
and
what
then,
I think the confusion comes in.
right, and then you have the Trango Re
Okay.
on the left side, which is the tallest one.
Right.
In terms of like altitude, right? So you get a little bit of like the Trango Tower, the Great Trango Tower, the Nameless Tower, like
Yeah. Okay, cool.
all the Trangos,
Okay.
And then we went and we did the Eternal Flame on the Nameless Tower, which was like, it was really cool. It's like El Capitan, actually a little bit taller than El Capitan, but 21,000 feet. So it was really cool adventure and just be wall climbing at that altitude. And there is actually like ice climbing and mixed climbing involved on that route. 30 some pitches, 37 pitches or so.
Mm-hmm.
And it was pretty neat to be like in the middle of the Karakoram, on the Baltoro Glacier, just being like surrounded by all these gigantic towers. Because on the same valley, you have Shipton Tower, you have the Cut Ear Spires, and you have Uli Viejo, which is one of the most incredible
That
things.
thing looks like a monster.
Oh man, it's crazy.
Yeah.
It's crazy. And talking with like John Ross Kelly, who did the first ascent of Uli Viejo and the Great Trango Tower with other people too. It was just really cool to talk with someone who's still alive, and just like, you look at these formations and you're like, wow, like crazy those guys did this in the 70s, But yeah, it was really neat, man, just being up there and like climbing the tower on a style of like B-wall, but also like alpinism, just to kind of like put it all together, because we didn't bring portal ledges or anything like that, or big holdbacks or anything. We just had seen their backpacks lightweight and then just going as fast as we could, which still took 3 days to climb,
Right.
And it was moments of like rocks coming down through our tent on high camp. There is this high camp, it's called the Red Star Camp, when David Lama, because he was there, he was the one who gave us a lot of the information about the Trango Tower, and the Poe brothers actually gave us some information about it, and Lama,
They're like undercling,
totally.
crimp, then side pull, and you're just like cam.
Oh, so we were like in the Summit Athlete in Puerto Rico, where like all the athletes for North Face go and get together and all that. And I was talking with the Poe brothers; those guys are awesome. And they asked me like, "So what are you doing the Crux pitch?" I was like, "Oh, I took like the 0.5, I jam in the crack, and I pull as hard as I could on that thing for 40 feet. And then like the face of disappointment of those guys.
Exactly.
Like we weren't up there to like free that thing. It's only been free once. Anyways, it's like, yeah, we were just like trying to get to the summit of that thing,
Yeah.
But it was really, really cool. And being up there with Anna and Dave, it was really cool. And just seeing the way how he just climbs and moves in the vertical rock is amazing, dude. Like, how like, for me at least, which I'm not a climber or B-wall climber for that matter. I mean, I have climbed B-walls, I have climbed El Cap and Half Dome and long routes, but I by no stretch of the word I will consider myself a B-wall climber. But watching him just like plug a cam and just start climbing on those things is like, and he also was using like these things called alfifi. You know where those things are? So it's basically like if you take a Speed Daisy from Yates,
Yeah.
but at the end, instead of having the carabiner, you have a fifi hook. So you can do all kinds of crazy things with those. Like I was just mind blown by how he moved with those things and how really like that tool allows you to do all kinds of stuff. So
it's wild, and it's like I am a big wall climber. Definitely past tense. No, actually 2 years ago I climbed a big wall. That counts. But anyway, it's interesting because I know, like, I only from this show and from talking to Dave and and talking to Quinn and all these people who speed climb, and it's like we both call ourselves big wall climbers, but it's like it's like the equivalent is I'm like a straight shaft ice climber to like their fully high tech everything bent shaft, like just that's the difference between like the big wall climbing that I did practically and like what a guy like Alfred's doing. I have no idea. Like I have only a vague idea. Like we had fifi hooks, but I have no idea what you're talking about when he's like just speeding up a pitch with them. It's like
it's pretty cool to watch, and it was really cool to watch him up there on the head wall because it's pretty steep how he was moving and all that, and we had a little bit of weather at the end. Like the guy who was doing the forecast for us was spot on. This guy Jim Woodmansey from Jackson Hole, Wyoming. He was like by the hour, dude. He basically was like, you guys have 24 hours of or 48 hours, I think it was, for a weather window. And we were talking with him via InReach, and then all of a sudden he's like, your weather window just like reduced by like 12 hours or something like that. And we were like in a sunny terrace, which is 12 pitches up. And we had a powwow, like what are we going to do? Like, are we going to go full throttle and we can see the weather coming? And we just decided to go up and we climbed the tower. And then like the last 4 pitches of the tower is actually ice climbing and snow climbing. I was the one who's going to like take care of that because that's my cup of tea. And I didn't really bring that much in terms of ice climbing gear. And I just remember like climbing up there being like, because we were linking as many pitches as we could. And I would link like 3 pitches at the top. And I just remember like, it's the classic like one screw like 30 feet below and you're climbing like super thin ice and you're like, oh man, I wish I had like way more ice screws and all that. But it was cool, man. We climbed the tower and came back down, and it was a pretty magical experience up there. And then once we climbed the tower back in base camp, I had a couple days of kind of like reflection, and we have plenty of days left in base camp, and actually like good weather after the storm, because we did the storm did hit us when we were rappelling down, and it was pretty kind of like crazy experience. So I decided to go and solo the 1984 route on the Great Triangle Tower, base camp to base camp, on a single push. I didn't know if I was going to be able to make it.
And that was the route you'd done?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. So I already knew
right. Yeah.
what happened. Nonetheless, you go from 13,000 feet just to shy of 21,000 feet and back. And it's like I say, it's not the most technical things, but you are actually like rock climbing and mixed climbing and ice climbing and all that. And it was, when I got to the summit, it was actually, I was like 10 feet below the summit, because the summit itself, you have like this gnarly cornice on it, But it was really nice to be out there by yourself and just seeing like K2 and Broad Peak and K1, Masherbrum, and all these other peaks and all the other towers. And it's a cool thing that to be there by yourself and just to take it all in and reflect on life and all that, It's kind of like a reflection point.
Yeah, I reckon. But I always feel like when I hear those stories, because, even like Timmy O'Neill's talking about like soloing Amada Blom, which is a whole, like, definitely not as serious as what you're on. And he was up there at night when he topped out. And like, but just that idea of like reflecting, I'm always like in the back of my mind, like, yeah, but don't reflect too much on how you're by yourself. Like, I feel like,
totally. Yeah.
Like, let me reflect for a minute, but let me not go down the rabbit hole that I actually am alone
Yeah.
here right now, and like I still have to go down. Like, let's keep that little bit of information like kind of just simmering in the background, because if you started to like really, trip out on that, all of a sudden you'd just be like, holy shit, I'm all by myself.
Oh, totally, dude. Totally. And you're like, wait, how am I'm going to have to down climb these? And
Right.
I had a little, like a rope, a tag line with me, 60 meter of tag line. And you're like, how am I going to like descend from like, 20,500 feet down to 13,000 feet? And all
so I just feel like it's like you must have to sort of compartmentalize your philosophical musings and just be like, I'm gonna muse about this, but I'm not gonna muse about that right now until I'm like done with it.
Yeah, totally, dude. And it just kind of like gives you that sense of like you do so much preparation for something, then you get to the summit and then you literally spend like 5 or 10 minutes and then you come down.
Then you're just like, oh shit, I gotta get out of here because I got a lot to do.
Totally.
Yeah.
So yeah, no, it was really
well. Let me
cool.
ask you this too about that. I mean, did you feel solid the whole way? Were there times when you were just like you had to sort of keep the dragon at bay in terms of fear? Like Honnold always talks about, like you can't let the people like talk about how we're adrenaline junkies, and he's all like, no, if you let the adrenaline start, you're in trouble, on a free solo. Did you have moments where you're like, okay, like don't let this get out of control right now? Or did you feel pretty solid on the whole thing?
No, absolutely. You definitely feel, or for me at least, felt a couple times when you need to be like, hey, like this is, you need to be on your toes. Right. Literally on your toes. Because, you have a 5,000 foot drop. Right. And you're dealing with rock, but you're also dealing with the snow, which... that medium changes quite quickly. Same thing with the ice. You have to be super, super on point. Otherwise, you're going to take the ride of your life, I guess, like...
The last one.
The last one.
Right.
Yeah. But the journey is it might sound cliche, but the journey instead of the destination, that's what I remember the most. I do remember like being up there and just looking around and seeing all these iconic peaks and walls and all that, and just being up there by myself and just kind of having this, it's like, oh wow, like I'm all the way up here, and in a place that is super magical, like you have to be there to understand the scale of this place, I've been in many mountains and many summits, but this one is just like, it's like the giants of the giants, so it was pretty cool, man, to be up there and make the whole journey.
Well, it's also, that one, like when you were talking about the Eternal Flame, it's as this like El Cap size big wall, maybe even a little bigger. What I think people kind of like forget to put in the mix when you compare those two things is just how like genteel that El Cap actually is.
Oh, totally, dude.
In terms of weather, in terms of rescue, and then also like the fact that when you top out, you're done. The East Ledges has its scary moments for sure, especially if you're trying to carry a haul bag down it. But, you're done. You're on top. Like this is, if the worst comes to worst, and many people have had to do this, you march through the woods until you get to the road. And so to compare the two is like a very, very distant comparison, I think, even though that's anytime someone's wall climbing anywhere around the world, you'll hear that like, well, this is about the size of El Cap, or like twice the size of El Cap, or half the size of El Cap.
Yeah.
But El Cap is like, it's like the gym climbing big wall of the world in a way, because everything is there for you. And to get to the top of El Cap and then realize that you have to do this like sketchy descent back down El Cap versus like, grabbing that jug of water that you pre-placed for yourself and then walking down.
Oh yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, yeah, it's kind of, the comparison is just, it's apt in a way because everybody can relate, or a lot of climbers can relate to El Cap, but it's also just like completely ludicrous to compare the two.
Two totally different things, and I think we all had a learning experience from that, like, yeah, El Capitan is just a whole different thing.
Yeah. As rad as it is and as hard as the routes are, it's still it's still like almost like nowadays like entry level wall climbing.
I mean, you're in a national park in this country. In national parks, they are well maintained. You know,
totally,
so you literally just wrap or walk down, and you're on a major national park.
Yeah, in a city. In the case of Yosemite. Like,
over there.
Go get a sandwich and so. Well, that's awesome. And I mean, and then like it seems like you talk about sort of reflection, and you really were adamant about wanting to talk about that on this show. You know? So it seems like it had sort of a effect on you as a climber.
Oh, totally, man. I think it was like, in a way, for me, it was like a pinnacle,
right?
Of not only the objective, but like the commitment on doing something by yourself and being out there by yourself and just being like, hey, like. Yeah, I didn't even have a stove. Basically, like, brew at 17,000 feet, and then I just had one water bottle and a couple of snacks, and because everything needed to be like, you know, everything needed to be super, super light, at least for me. So it was like zero room for error, like zero, like zero. Like I didn't even have enough, like clothes to spend a night up there if something went wrong or anything like that, you know. I get what people like to go out there by themselves, you know, into the mountains. Like Kyle used to be one of those dudes Kyle Dempster, who go out there by himself in these mountains. And the guy who did the logistics for us, higher ground expeditions, this guy Gafor, who have done.
Oh, right. Yeah. He's Kyle and HK's guy over there.
Yeah. And Kelly and Josh Ward. Dude, the story that he tells when they did Assalamu alaikum, I think it was, that route that those guys put up. And the way he talks, he's like, oh, yeah, I was watching them, and I saw that something fell down, and it turned out to be their stove, and they won, you know? And he's have this accent, he's like, those fuckers are crazy, and I thought they were going to come back down. I had dinner for them, but however many days later, they come down and they look like shit. He's like, they're crazy. And he also used to say that him and Kyle go Alpine style. Yeah, you know,
him
like,
and Kyle go Alpine
he just
style.
Like, each one of them carry a backpack, and Gafor goes to the high point with Kyle, and then Kyle just goes and do his thing. And so Gafor is such a wonderful person, and he have as much climbing history in Pakistan.
Yeah, and it's like else, really cool that they found that guy, because I mean I know so many people that go climbing over there and have, like, you know, and you guys did too. We talked about it on here, the trip to Kyrgyzstan, where you just have all these problems with the outfitters and the liaisons and the cooks and stuff, and so they just like lucked into finding not just a guy that's good at what he does, but personality-wise, they just seem to have clicked with them. I mean, he loved those guys.
Oh yeah, dude, and just the stories and the history that is almost like untold history, you know. Yeah. Especially from a third eye kind of guy, is pretty neat, man. So yeah. But it was cool, and we also actually had to witness the rescue of the guys in Laytok, the two Russian guys.
Oh, right.
The guy who failed with all the gear, and the other guy who was up there for how many days.
Right.
And the helicopters came and got him. On our hiking to base camp, you have to pass a couple military bases. And we saw like the helicopters flying in and out. You cannot really see Laytok from there, but we saw the two helicopters, and we asked Gafor, and Gafor told us that they were like basically like trying to get the guy. And we were hiking around this military base. We saw the two helicopters coming back, someone getting out, package it, you know, like a patient kind of style. They did something to him, put him back in the helicopter, and flew away. And so it just kind of definitely give you that sense of like, all right, this is for real, you know, like in order for you to get a helicopter in Pakistan, man, it's the prime minister have to be involved. It's quite involved thing. So, expedition's been pretty cool. Alaska, you know, also like climbing in Alaska has been awesome. Going to the Revelations with my good friend Clint Helander, who he introduced me to that place, and having a couple mega epics on that place. One time we got hit by an avalanche in base camp. We lost everything. It was one of the most just crazy things that I have experienced in the mountains, you know, just being stripped by everything, by an avalanche. We survived this avalanche, and then 3 days into like full on survival mode, somehow we survived that thing. It was crazy. Then the next year we went back.
Well, wait, what happened after 3 days? Did they come and get you? What?
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
How did they know?
Well, we were like in touch with a friend of ours who's a pilot.
Oh, okay.
And then he came basically to our rescue.
Right.
But it was one of the most like traumatic things. I remember just having like nightmares, literally nightmares after that, because it was a couple nights when we were keep getting hit by avalanches. We were in a little bit safer spot, but like you can feel the powder cloud and like sleeping with your boots. Our tent got totally destroyed, so we were sleeping on this like quasi put tent together, and like we're just like, we lost some fair amount of gear. So it was just one of those things that again like just puts into perspective, but like, oh wow, this is the full on. So the next year we went back with our friend Leon. We climbed this face halfway up. Leon's crampon broke, so we tried to fix it, but it didn't really turn out. So when they came to pick us up, it was so much wind that you have this like wind slap on top, and then this sugary snow at the bottom. So our friend Connor, who flew us in, he brought one of his bigger planes, and we're going to try to take off. We put all our gear in one pile, and he only have wait for the three of us to get out, right? So we are all strapped into the plane and doing the, like the glacier takeoff, and he just started going and going and going and going, and he's like, nope, I don't like it. He's having like, he's not really gaining his speed.
Right.
So we're like, oh man. And then at the end of the runway, quote unquote, you can see boulders, right? So he's like, you guys are going to have to get out. And so his plan, it was for us to get out, for him to take off light and then do a couple passes to compact the thing. And he goes, like another quarter of the way down, and he's just not really making it. So he stops, and we're like, oh shit. We went there, and we have to take everything out of the plane. Anything that you could like basically like take out of the plane, we like dump some fuel. One of the things that I remember is like we leave the skis of the plane, and I'm like under one of the skis putting a skin wax from our approach skis on the ski of the plane. Ski. And I'm looking at this thing, it's like, if this plane shift, it's gonna crush me, and I'm like doing like putting a skin wax on the plane and all that. Dude, it was so epic. And then so we took everything out of the plane, and it was like movie style. We're like giving hugs to Connor, and we were like, all right, dude, vaya con Dios, go with God. I was like, and then he just went like full like, Indiana Jones style. Like he was like, because it's like once you get a plane stuck in the middle of the Revelations, it's like a helicopter is going to have to come and get that thing. And that stuff is going to cost thousands of dollars.
Yeah, like some sky crane helicopter is like going to cost so much money. So
he just went for it, and like on the last second before the boulders, he just lifted off. It was just like this relief, and then he did the pass thing when he compacted everything, and yeah.
So he was like coming down and like sitting, like skimming the snow a few times to try to create a runway.
Correct.
Oh, Jesus.
Yeah, he finally did it, and he took us out, and then like the next day or later that night, he went and he got all our gear, because we had a pile of gear on top of it. And expeditions, man, these things you learn a lot, but
it's lucky those pilots are such cowboys.
Oh, dude.
Yeah, and cowgirls, actually.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
John Barco now is a pilot over there, and he does like all kinds of crazy stuff. So pretty incredible, the things that you do. And the stories, when you come back, people are like, oh, how was it? And you're like, man, it's just so hard to put into words. Even what I just told you is just hard to put the sentiment and everything that we all felt on that moment.
Right.
Of just being like, this is full on. It was pretty cool. But the good old Ouray Ice Park and Ouray area train you for like the big mountains, you know.
It's like, okay, you're in the hot tub, and then you're like, well, maybe we should go do some pitches, and you're like, nah, let's wait a little bit longer in the hot tub. And then you're like, okay, let's go do some pitches, and then like 3 hours later, back in the hot tub.
Yeah,
you're
totally.
like,
Yeah.
like that was epic, bro.
Yeah. And then when you
Do you
are
remember
like,
that last pitch we did?
Yeah.
Like, yeah, you mean right over there?
Yeah, right.
Pointing from the hot tub?
Totally. It's like, oh, the round number 9 in the schoolroom was
Okay, now
sick.
where are we going to
you know?
get food tonight? Should we go to this restaurant or that restaurant? Who has
Right.
better margaritas?
Yeah, totally. But you know, like
This is epic, bro.
for me, that's kind of like my stomping ground.
Yeah,
So
totally.
when I go to the big mountains, it's kind of like, oh, you know, like feed even, archer back, swing,
Right,
one thing
right.
and another, and ice climbing over there.
Well,
and-
I mean, joking around, but still, I mean, there's nowhere in the world where you can get the mileage on ice like you can in the ice park. And a lot of times, you know, being fit and being ready is just a matter of mileage.
Oh, totally.
In other places where you have to go like march into the mountains, you know, from your local zone and do like 2 pitches of ice or 3 pitches of ice in a day, that doesn't get you mileage. Is like you've done 3 pitches of ice like before 10 a.m. in the
Right.
ice park. you
Right,
know?
right.
So, I mean, joking aside, it's like just swinging your tools is preparing you, and you make more sticks with your tools, you're probably going to be more prepared.
Oh,
you know?
totally.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
it's definitely like has its value as a training place. You know?
Yeah. Yeah, and that place is pretty special. You know, just so much history and so much climbing up there. And in fact, one of the fun, the most memorable days of ice climbing over there, it was with this guy, Mike Pennings, that you probably know quite well.
Yeah,
about,
Oh, I
like,
know
under the
Mike
radar
Pennings. That's
guys.
another guy. Yeah, that's like a CIA agent or something. Although I happen to know that he's not. But yeah, he's like a legend in Colorado, I think. But beyond that,
Oh man, yeah.
he's probably kind of unheard of.
Yeah. So I'm having this like, or the San Juans is having this amazing ice season, right? And Mike is gonna go ice climbing with Jesse Huey in Norway, and Jesse's like, hey, dude, make sure that Mike goes ice climbing because they're gonna go on this trip, and Mike having ice climbing like a decade or something like that.
Right.
That dude doesn't even know what like leashless ice axes are, right? Like he's like you, like back, you know, in the day, like straight shaft, knuckle bangers, you know. all
But
that.
see, the thing that about Mike is that he really is like the off the couch master of the universe.
Oh
like
my
that's always
God,
been
dude,
his.
yeah.
You know, you don't train. I mean, you just go climbing and you get it done. And if you're unprepared, you just try harder,
Totally.
basically. So yeah, I can imagine Jesse's sort of like, yeah, I know he's not going to do it on his own. So
no, he's not. He actually doesn't really like ice climbing at all. He's like, dude, ice climbing is dumb, you know? Like, why you do that? Let's go skiing instead.
Right.
But then I was like, Mike, let's go ice climbing. And he's like, okay, yeah, I need to go ice climbing before I go to Norway. And I'm like, he's like, all right, what time are you gonna pick me up? And I was like, I'm gonna pick you up at 2 a.m. And he's like, what? What are you talking about? And I'm like, dude, I have this plan, you know? And in my mind, I have this master plan. I just needed someone who was stoked on doing it. So good old Mike is like, oh yeah, okay, whatever. So I go and pick up Mike at 2 a.m. In Ridgeway, and we drive to Telluride. And I'm basically like lending all my gear, right? Like adjusting crampons on the go and ice tools, you know, nomics. He doesn't even know how to like what a nomic is like, and leashless, which is like the newest cool. And then we went and we go and climb up Bridalveil, right? So I start leading because he's like, dude, like I'm so rusty ice climbing. You go and lead. So
Well, when he was ice climbing, that was still like, A, it was illegal to climb it.
Right.
And B, if you did, it was like an ultimate career-making test piece.
oh yeah,
Yeah.
totally.
So like times have changed.
Yeah. So I start climbing Bridalveil, and we're just going to do a continuous movement. So basically we're simul climb the whole thing. So I'm like climbing there with like my headlamp on, and it's cold and all that. And all of a sudden I hear like, oh, whoa, whoa, whoa. And I'm like, what's going on? Yelling. He's like, I almost dropped my tool, you know? Like, so we like simul Bridalveil. Then I was like, all right, let's go to Ames, the ice hose. Right. And the ice hose was like you say, like back when Michael Kennedy and Lou Dawson
yeah.
did the first ascent. It was funny, you know, like the last time that I was hanging out with Hayden here in Rifle for Dave Peck's memorial, Hayden was asking his dad, why is that the ice host took them like 2 days to climb? He's like, Dad, why took you guys so long? You know? And Michael is like, dude, try to do that with like, like straight shaft and like those pounding ice screws and all
snarks
that.
and
all that. So
strap-on crampons.
Oh, dude, yeah.
So we went boots, probably.
Right. We went and we climbed the ice hose, finish, and I'm like, all right, let's go to your A. So we went and we did the talisman. We simul climbed Talisman, came back down. And by then now Mike was feeling like, all right, I want to lead some stuff. So we went and we do Bear Brain, So Mike
I don't, but I'll just, I'm assuming people know what the hell you're talking about. These are hard pitches in the ice park or something?
No, they're actually pretty long routes.
Up above your A.
Yeah.
Okay.
Cool. Long routes, just to put it in perspective, one of those routes for most people, it will take a full day. Right. Now we are in our fourth route, and Mike is out there just doing his thing, climbing.
Well, that's really that is probably the fundamental thing of Mike Penning's is just the ability to keep going and have energy and stoke for 24-hour, 36-hour missions. Yeah. So he's up there just doing his thing. We climb Bear Brain, and then there is another route to the left. It's called the Ribbon, and we did that. And then we drove to Silverton, and we end up doing Stairway to Heaven. And the Stairway to Heaven is pretty funny because by then we were it was dark already. And Mike is he wants to lead the first speech of Stairway to Heaven. Stairway to Heaven is a massive ice floor, right? And I'm sitting there, eating some snacks and just belaying him. And all of a sudden I start hearing this super hollow ice. And I'm like, when the fuck is Mike climbing that is hollow ice? So I point my headlamp and put on full throttle, and I see him, and he's just totally missed the main floor, and he's climbing some bullshit ice on the left side, and I'm he's like, dude, this is kind of sketchy up here, and I'm like, oh my God, dude, you are the only person who just misses the massive floor, and you're questioning something. And we finished that route and then went to Whorehouse Houses, climbed Whorehouse Houses, and then we actually went and started looking for this other route that is called Dukes of Hazzard. But by then, it was super late. We're so tired. Our feet hurt so much kicking and swinging and all that. So we bailed on that. But we basically end up climbing 7 routes on a day. Nice.
And the previous time, I think the previous record or whatever is 4 routes, So we finished the day. And basically what kept us fueled throughout the day was these rice cakes that Vince Anderson told us to make. So the rice cakes, a bunch of Red Bulls, and chewing tobacco. That's what kept us going.
Well, one other, if Penning's is involved, there was one other substance involved as well. But
it was so much fun.
A very Colorado-centric climbing, for some people, a climbing stimulant.
Oh man, it was so cool just to do that, and just watching Mike. And by the time we finished, you're all right, cool. I don't have to climb for another decade. You know? They went to Norway and then they did their mission over there. Right. But till the day, he haven't really ice climbed since.
Did he go buy some tools, or is he still borrowing shit when he went to Norway?
No. I think it was probably borrowing some stuff. Yeah. He's not going to buy ice climbing gear. No way, dude. He probably will buy his skis, if that.
Right on.
Yeah, it was cool, man. It was cool spending some time with him up there. And that day is just one of a kind. So, yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah, dude.
Let's talk about your professional life,
all right.
Which is, as a professional climber, guiding is a professional life too, but it's somewhat new. You've sort of dabbled in it, but now it's your living.
Yeah.
And it's kind of your full-time gig.
Totally.
So let's talk about a little bit of a transition into that, and if that was something you aimed for a long time, or was it an opportunity that came up out of nowhere, or how that came about?
Let's see. I've been climbing sponsor climber for close to 12 years.
Right.
But different companies do different things, you know, in terms of their program and all that. I've been climbing for Petzl for 12 years.
Okay.
And everything from like, I started as like a regional athlete, went into more like a national athlete, and now I'm like part of like the global athlete. And beyond that, I get to do a fair amount of like R&D, so research and development with Petzl in ice axes, crampons, ice crews, all kinds of stuff, you know.
You invented the Grigri, right?
Pretty much.
Yeah.
Yeah. No. But that's pretty cool, you know. And I have worked for like 510 and Oslo and Low Alpine, Millet for a little while, and then 4 years ago, Conrad Enker actually brought me into the TNF team, which was awesome. You know, Conrad has been a good friend of mine, someone that I know for a long time from festivals and things like that, and someone that I really look up to, you know, and I had the opportunity to be part of TNF and on the Alpine climbing team. And deeper than that, actually, I get the opportunity to develop a lot of like items or gear for them, you know, in the Summit series side of things. So it's really cool because I get to climb nowadays full time for the past about 4 years. But beyond that, which climbing is pretty cool. This is my life, but I sometimes feel like I need to do something else, you know, and working on the R&D, working with the designers and developers and all that, it have a spark a different creative side of me, you know, learning about materials and ergonomics and all that stuff. There's so much to go into making gear, you know, and for some reason I'm pretty good at that stuff, you know, just like coming with different ideas and different ways of doing stuff. And it's been really, really cool, you know. So that's I would say that's my forte in terms of what I can, you know, give back to a company as an athlete is just my ideas and willing to work, you know, like blue collar, call it,
right.
A professional athlete, you know, alpinist. And it's pretty sweet when you like take something that comes from your own needs and those guys listen to you and then they understand where you're coming from, and then you start like seeing prototypes and first and second and third round of prototypes, and all of a sudden there is like you see in like climbing shops or like you know, things like that. So that's pretty cool, man.
So you've been on the North Face team as a sort of full team member for about 3 or 4 years, right?
Yeah, 4 years now.
Yeah, and so, you know, I don't know, was it 2 years ago? I don't even know how long it's been. Like, time has become this year in the 2020, like something seemed like ancient history that happened like a week ago.
I know,
you know,
totally.
and other shit's like right in your face. But so you were on the team when the House Peak accident happened, and you guys lost, you know, 3 friends as well as team members in Hans-Org Auer and Jess Roskelly and David Lama. You have your personal, you know, what you dealt with that personally because you were close with at least 2 or 3 of those guys, and of course knew Hans as well. But you know, my question, I guess, is what sort of soul searching or reflection did you feel like happened within the North Face team as a group? Because more often than not, these climbers that do perish in the mountains these days are either sponsored climbers or they're on, you know, sponsored expeditions. You know, whether it's Russian climbers or French climbers or American climbers, it's just like the people that play in that atmosphere are oftentimes not on their own trip. I mean, we mentioned fucking Schaefer a while ago. That guy seems to just pull it off on his own, but you know, so, you know, what can you tell me about like what the self-reflection and within the team was like, where you have to reflect on, you know, accusations that somebody might have been pushing themselves because they're sponsored? That's always been in the ether within climbing and all those sorts of things. How did the team sort of approach and deal and process that loss of these like 3 superstar members and just great guys that all perished together on one mountain?
Yeah, I truly believe that within, and for me, is in my own personal life too, like out of bad situations, always good things happen. Learning experiences on self-reflection or ways to do things differently, and things like that. In this case, it was pretty cool, I think, from my perspective, just because the whole entire company got involved, as in all the way from the CEO down to someone like myself, which is just an athlete, and it was unity, and it was a lot of team building that happens from that, and people were asking questions to like people like myself, alpinists, or people who were like super close to them, and the company really just put all the resources that they had to help us with that. Nowadays we have Team Tate, which is a professional, what's the word for this?
Like a counselor.
A counselor,
right? Who's
like there for us, basically 24/7. He actually helped Conrad when he lost Alex Lowe, and when that happened, the avalanche that happened in the Himalayas with them, and he's been working with Team since back then. So it's been really, really awesome to see the support that we get from the company, and just for them to be there for us and listen, like no one was obligated to do anything. We know what we're getting ourselves into, and we know that our profession is dangerous,
right?
In skiing and running, in rock climbing, in alpinism, I think alpinism, out of all of them that I just mentioned, you have to deal with way more unknowns or certains or like variables. But the response of the brand, it was awesome, to see that we never were left alone, and they were always like, hey, we're here for you guys, whatever you guys need, and I think that's what it's all about, and I have nothing but respect and appreciation for what the brand did for their families and to keep remembering them, but for all the rest of us who have to kind of, at least for me, carry the burden mentally, of that. There is truly no a day that I don't think about those guys. I have a picture of David and all of them in my phone from different like adventures that we did together. And in my camper, I have some pictures, and every time that I make a decision, in the mountains or climbing, I'm just like, oh man, let's just be mindful of what you're doing on decision makings and all that, just because it's real,
right?
And losing them, it was something really, really sad, obviously. But what happens, and you have to move on, or at least for me, I have to move on with my career and with my climbing and who I am, carrying their torch and remembering them. And it's just something that things happen, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, it's I've been on this whole Enormocast thing for 10 years, and it's like there's several people I've interviewed that are not here anymore,
right?
Or friends of them, or most poignantly within the Enormocast world, Hayden Kennedy, who didn't die in a mountain, but was was sort of kind of peripherally involved in mountains with the skiing accident that precipitated him taking his own life. But it just like it bristles me to sort of this idea that, like, which I think was in sort of the ether of like, oh yeah, the sponsorship pushes these climbers to do these things that they wouldn't normally do, or push the envelope. And it's just like, it's just such an insult to say that about three, bright, autonomous adults, who completely understood what they're doing. Hans Rogauer understood what the risks were that he was taking. There's, it's like, it kind of like bums me out, because it's just like, well, what are you saying? He was a child who didn't who couldn't understand like what he was getting into. So I mean, that reflection of like stuff happens in the mountains, you know, it sounds sort of like cliche, but that's the ultimate truth, is that you can't control all these factors, and the people going into the mountains, especially at that level, like fully understand that simple fact of like there are things that are uncontrollable.
Oh,
you know?
totally.
Yeah.
And in this case, man, like these three guys are highly trained athletes, Like Hans was a mountain guy, like certified mountain guy, you know. Lama has been climbing since he was little dude, you know, and he climbed in all the greatest ranges, you know, and Jess grew up on a mountain guy home, you know, like John Roskell is a mountain guy and did amazing things. Actually, how I met Jess, it was guiding in Mount Rainier, you know. So those guys
Which ascent, the 80th or like the 85th? When did you meet him?
That was actually the beginning of my career when I had like 1 or 2 summits. But those guys were highly trained, and they were taking every single calculated risk that it was to take, and it wasn't. They knew. You know, they knew that every step that they were taking but in the same time, nothing is guaranteed in the mountains.
Right.
Nothing is guaranteed in the mountains. You know, you can stack the odds in your favor, and then some freaky accident happen. Funny, dude, like I was actually walking here we are in Rifle, and I was walking towards the project wall, and I'm like walking with my backpack and all that, and like I'm going to do my warm up. And then I just heard this like, whoom. And I look back, and it's a rock, dude. A rock probably like this size, you know, like baseball size or whatever. And it falls down from the top.
Right.
You know, like 10 seconds later, dude, it would have hit me in the head.
Right.
So it's like, it's one of those things that in life that you just have no control whatsoever. And I think that was their case. It was just a freaky accident, and they do happen, you know, and in the mountains that happens. So. Yeah,
it's sad they're gone still. Yeah. I'm sure you miss those guys.
Oh yeah, for sure, man. It's friends, you know. It's your family. Is the people that you know you work with and you grew up as in like, you know, as a climber, as in professional setting, and you become really really tight with people, and it's just death is part of life, obviously, you know, and I guess you just have to like conceptualize and just try to deal with all that.
Well, man, thanks for coming on the show. It's been a long time. We've talked about it a lot. Actually.
I know, yeah.
And, you know, it's like half the time that when we're just hanging out, shooting the shit, I'm like, oh, man, we should be recording this. It's like always a good time and always really, really funny. So I wish you well, and I hope that the expeditions get back underway here so you can get back to sort of your calling up there in the big mountains and, you know, less knee barring and more more marching up snow slopes, I guess.
Yeah. No, I'm super stoked to be here, and thanks for having me. And hopefully things get better and we can all go to the mountains to ski and run and climb, and otherwise we just keep climbing the same slippery feet and you know, undercleans and pinches here in Rifle, so it's all good. Yeah.
All right, folks, welcome to the end of that epic podcast with Andres. Thank you so much for sitting down, Andres. And actually, the cool thing is we got to climb together both the days that we recorded. We did actually do that one in person out in Rifle. And it was just nice to go climbing. And one we did afterwards and one we did before. So just an old school Normacast style. Feels like a long time since I've done that. All right, folks. Everybody is on the road right now. Everybody is out climbing. It's crazy. It seems like the opposite of what's supposed to be happening. I read an article where a 300% increase in visitors in a lot of climbing areas. So be careful. That's a lot of people running around. Be careful of the environment. You know, be extra careful about where you put your feet, what you clean up, where your poop goes, all those things. And of course, check your knot. This whole country needs to be checking each other's knots right now. Some knot checking would do us all some good.
You